I always thought love sounded loud, like laughter echoing down a hallway or two people talking over each other just to be heard. I never expected it to whisper and still break me. It was a Friday evening, one of those in-between hours when the sun's still hanging on, but the hallway lights are already glowing. I had just pulled Rachel into a hug, nothing dramatic, just the kind of embrace people in love are supposed to share without thinking. Something routine. A pause in the day. I wasn't expecting anything but that moment of simple closeness. But as my arms wrapped around her, I heard it. Barely audible, slipped through a breath she probably didn't mean to let out. God, don't. My body froze. Everything inside me just locked. Her body was stiff, barely brushing against mine, like the contact itself was something she had to tolerate. And before I could even ask what was wrong, she turned abruptly and disappeared into the bedroom. No eye contact, no explanation. Like a shadow fleeing from light. I didn't follow. I just stood there, my arms still half extended, hanging uselessly in the space she used to fill. Behind the closed door, I heard nothing but the soft sound of fabric shifting. I stayed in the hallway longer than I care to admit, just listening, replaying the moment over and over again in my head, hoping I misheard, hoping it was something else. A whisper meant for no one. A breath, not a word. But no matter how I twisted it, those two words remained. God, don't. That's not confusion. That's not affection. That's not stress from a long day. That's rejection. Resentment. Maybe. Something she'd been holding back. Something I wasn't supposed to hear. I dropped my arm slowly and turned toward the wall, where a photo hung in a cheap wooden frame. It was us. Rachel and I, standing on a bluff 2 summers ago, wind in her hair, sunlight bleeding into the lens. She had her hand wrapped around my waist, her face pressed into my shoulder, smiling like she had everything she ever wanted. And I looked exhausted, but proud, like a man who built a life with his own hands and thought it would last. Back then, I thought I was lucky. Not the fairy tale kind. Not chosen by the universe lucky. Just a man who found someone before the storm hit. That photo lied to me. Or maybe we were both lying, even then. I waited for her to come out, for the door to creak open, for her to offer some clumsy excuse, a bad dream, a sore back, a stressful phone call. But the door never moved. The silence didn't explain itself. I didn't knock. I didn't beg for clarification. I just walked into the kitchen and leaned against the counter. One of her mugs was their pale blue, chipped near the handle, half full of cold tea. The paper tag from the bag dangled off the side like some forgotten warning. I stared at it, thought about how something so ordinary could suddenly feel like a threat. Who says something like that when their husband hugs them? I wanted to be furious. Really, I did. But what I felt was hollow. Like I just opened the fridge expecting a meal and found it completely empty. Rachel and I were never flashy. We weren't the couple that friends envied or gushed over. But we had rhythm. I worked as a systems engineer for a regional airline, deadlines, logistics, and 10-hour shifts. She ran a freelance design studio out of our home, boutique work, mostly for sustainable brands. Our life was neat. Grocery list in the Notes app, color-coded Google Calendar, laundry on Wednesdays, pizza on Fridays. Our whole relationship could have been printed and laminated like a family schedule posted on a fridge. Maybe that's why she flinched. Maybe she outgrew that kind of life. Or maybe she just outgrew me. What I couldn't shake wasn't the whisper or the hug. It was the way she turned and never looked back. Not even a flicker of regret. Like that moment wasn't spontaneous. Like it had been practiced in her mind a dozen times before. And that terrified me. Because if that wasn't shock, if it was instinct, then how long had she been hiding it? How many other moments had I missed? I didn't know it then, but that would be the last time I reached for her without second-guessing myself. After that, I wouldn't be reaching for comfort. I'd be reaching for the truth. We didn't speak about it the next day. Not directly. We moved around each other like strangers in an airport terminal, polite, distant, disconnected. She scrolled through her phone while sipping coffee. I packed my bag for work like nothing had changed. But everything had. That weekend, we were invited to a birthday party at our friend Greg's place. Just a casual evening. Drinks, board games, too much wine. I wasn't in the mood, but we went anyway. Rachel came alive around people. That's always been her magic. She knew how to light up a room. And that night, she did exactly that. She was glowing, laughing too loudly, touching people's arms when she talked, including his. Logan. I'd heard his name before. He was a client, supposedly. She mentioned him offhand in meetings, said he wanted a rebrand for some startup. But watching them that night, the way she touched his arm, the way she leaned in when he talked, it didn't look like business. I didn't say anything. Not yet. The car ride home was brutal. Rachel stared out the window like we'd just left a yoga retreat, not a social minefield. And I gripped the steering wheel like it was the only thing keeping my hands from shaking. That kiss, I said, voice low, measured. She didn't flinch. Didn't turn her head. What kiss? You know which one. Logan? She scoffed softly, like I was boring her. It was a dare. You're being dramatic. I turned my eyes back to the road. My mouth tasted like rust. You kissed him for 11 seconds, I said. She laughed. Dry. Dismissive. Are you timing me now? And that's when it hit me. She wasn't sorry. Not even close. She was amused. You're blowing this way out of proportion, she said. I didn't sleep with him. It's not like I cheated. That word hung in the air, unspoken but fully implied. I didn't answer. Because somewhere in that silence, something broke. And I didn't even know what it was yet. We pulled into the apartment parking lot, and I just sat there. Engine ticking, hands still on the wheel like I was mid-turn, mid-thought, mid-something I couldn't name. Rachel opened the door without another word, her heels clicking on the pavement as she walked away from me like we hadn't just unraveled in the car. I didn't follow her immediately. I stayed there another 5 minutes, maybe more. Not to calm down. I wasn't angry in the traditional sense. I was just stunned. Like I'd been in a car crash, only the airbag never deployed, and now I was sitting in the quiet aftermath trying to understand what had hit me. The apartment felt colder than usual. Rachel was already in bed, back to me, scrolling through her phone with the blue light glowing across her face. She looked like a stranger under that light, like someone too far away to reach. I didn't speak, didn't get in the bed, just went to the bathroom, turned the faucet, and splashed water on my face like that could reset me somehow. But my reflection just stared back, unchanged. Same haircut, same eyes, same man. But something inside had shifted. That night, I lay beside her and didn't sleep. Not even a little. My mind just kept spinning, but every thought seemed to orbit the same center, the same brutal, inescapable fact. She didn't care. Not about the kiss. Not about the moment. Not about how I felt. And if she didn't care, then what was I still doing here? By morning, I'd made a decision. If she wanted this to be a game, fine. But I wasn't going to keep playing as the fool who kept folding. She wanted casual? She wanted to laugh off everything serious like it was all just banter? Then I'd show her exactly how cold detachment looked when it wasn't coming from her side. The next weekend, we were at Greg's again. Another game night. Couples, wine, predictable playlists. Rachel was in rare form, telling stories too loudly, leaning too far toward Logan, laughing like she hadn't burned down our last conversation. But I wasn't watching her. I was watching Sophie. Sophie had always been around. Rachel's longtime friend. Kind, observant, always the one asking how you really were when no one else cared. She remembered birthdays. She brought extra snacks for people with allergies. She was the kind of person who didn't try to fill silence. She respected it. I found her by the kitchen island, sipping whiskey from a small glass. Still a bourbon girl? I asked. She looked up, surprised, then smiled. You remembered? Hard to forget, I said, voice easy. She laughed, low and genuine. The kind of laugh you don't fake. We talked. Nothing scandalous. Just talked. About work. Her new role in the city. Her hesitations about the move. Her hopes. And I listened. Really listened. Asked questions with weight. And every time Sophie smiled, I felt Rachel's eyes flick toward us. Every time Sophie leaned in, Rachel shifted in her chair across the room. I didn't gloat. Didn't put on a show. But I also didn't stop. Eventually, Rachel came over, too polished, too smiley. You two look cozy, she said, eyes locked on Sophie. Sophie smiled coolly. Noah was just telling me how much he appreciates digital design. Who knew? I shrugged. You spend enough time with a designer, some of it rubs off. Rachel's laugh was brittle. Off. Maybe you can design my next logo then, huh? I looked at her, unreadable. I think you already have plenty of volunteers. She blinked. Just a second. But enough for me to feel it land. Sophie excused herself soon after. But not before giving me a look. Curious, thoughtful. And I didn't feel guilty. Not one bit. At home that night, Rachel was quieter than usual. Didn't mention Sophie. Didn't ask about the conversation. But I caught her watching me through the mirror as I brushed my teeth. Her eyes scanning me like I was a book she hadn't finished and wasn't sure she liked anymore. And in that silence, something became clear. I didn't talk to Sophie because I was trying to cheat. I talked to her because it was the first time in weeks that Rachel seemed to actually feel something. She'd grown so used to me being predictable, soft, reachable. Now she couldn't read me. That spark I saw in her eye. It wasn't affection. It was fear. And fear meant she still had something to lose. Next weekend, another gathering. This time, a backyard party. String lights, melting coolers, cheap beer, and early 2000s pop songs playing off someone's half-dead Bluetooth speaker. Comfortable. Predictable. Rachel wore the red dress. The one she saved for nights when she wanted every man in the room to notice her, especially one. Logan was already there, of course. She beelined to him like gravity pulled her. I walked in, nodded at a few people, found my place by the fire pit, and waited. Sophie showed up 15 minutes later. Hair damp like she'd just stepped out of a hot shower, cheeks still flushed from the air. She found me near the fire. "Hey," she said, brushing ash off the bench before sitting beside me. "Didn't think I'd make it." "Glad you did," I said. And we talked. Again, nothing explicit. Just conversation. Real. Easy. It wasn't romantic. But it was intimate. Like we both understood the rules and neither of us wanted to break them yet. Then, of course, someone said it. Truth or dare? Of course they did. The group circled up fast. Chairs pulled close. Drinks refreshed. I ended up sitting directly across from Rachel. She perched in her lawn chair like a queen hosting her court. Sophie beside me. Quiet. Calm. The dare started harmless. Eat hot sauce. Text someone a dumb question. Harmless stuff. Then it was Rachel's turn. She didn't hesitate. "Noah," she said, eyes gleaming. "Truth or dare?" I didn't flinch. "Dare. Kiss someone." "Not me." She said it casually, but I heard the edge in her voice. I knew her too well. So I turned to Sophie. Didn't wait. Didn't explain. Just leaned in and kissed her. Not a showy peck. Not a polite party kiss. A real kiss. One with weight behind it. Sophie didn't pull away. She kissed me back. Slow, warm, unshaken. And when we pulled apart, she whispered just loud enough for me to hear. "Let's do that again sometime." I leaned back, turned to Rachel, and her mask had slipped. Just a little, but enough. The corner of her mouth twitched. Her fingers clenched around her cup. Her smile was suddenly too wide, too practiced. She laughed. Too loud, too sharp. But it didn't matter, because the damage was already done, and I wasn't done yet. I didn't look at Rachel for the rest of the night. I didn't need to. I kept my arm resting on the back of Sophie's chair, kept my voice light in the conversation, kept my laughter casual and honest, not loud, not performative. But every now and then, I could feel Rachel's attention prickling the back of my neck like static. Not because I was trying to provoke her. That part had already passed. I wasn't playing anymore. Later that night, as people filtered back inside to refill drinks and graze over leftover snacks, Rachel found me alone in the kitchen. I was at the sink, rinsing out a glass, letting the water run warm through my fingers. She stepped in behind me like she was staging something. "That was cute," she said, twirling the ice in her cup. Her tone tried to be light, but it cracked. "What was that little performance? You really wanted a reaction, huh?" I didn't turn around. Just set the glass down and wiped my hands with a towel. "I was just playing the same game you did." She stepped closer, voice dropping a notch. "You don't even like Sophie like that." I smiled to myself before answering. "You sure about that?" And there it was. The flinch in her eyes. The one she tried to hide behind whatever expression she'd been practicing all evening. That moment where the script fell apart and she realized she wasn't the one directing the scene anymore. I walked out before she could say anything else. And from that point on, I knew I had the upper hand. Not because I was manipulating her, but because I'd finally stopped being the one clinging. That kiss, that spark in Sophie's eye, that weightlessness in my chest, it was more than payback. It was proof I could still feel something that didn't revolve around pain. But that wasn't the end. That wasn't even the climax. That came a week later. Another party. This one at someone's lake house. More drinking, more fake laughter, more pretending. Rachel had been extra quiet that evening, which, if you knew her, was the equivalent of blaring alarms. She wasn't withdrawn because she was embarrassed. She was calculating. Tense. She stuck close to Logan that night. Every touch a little too long. Every laugh a little too loud. But the strange thing was, no one was really watching him. Everyone was watching her watching me. Sophie and I weren't being obvious. No hand-holding. No whispering in corners. But our energy was different. Calmer. Closer. We didn't need to perform. The air around us did that for us. And it didn't take long before Rachel snapped. We were all back near the fire pit. Marshmallows going around. Someone tossed out another dare, something dumb. Everyone laughed. Then Rachel's voice cut through the night like a slap. "Why don't you two just get a room already?" Everyone went silent. I looked at her slowly. "Excuse me?" "You heard me," she hissed, stepping closer. "Is this your big move, Noah? Flirting with my best friend like some teenager? You think this is clever?" Sophie shifted beside me, clearly stunned. "You dare me to kiss someone," I reminded her. "You kissed her like it meant something." Rachel shouted. "You humiliated me." All eyes were on us now. Conversation stopped. Even the fire seemed to burn quieter. I kept my voice level. "Didn't you do the same? Back at Greg's? With Logan?" "That was different," she snapped. "How?" Silence. Then she snapped again, louder. "You're pathetic, Noah. You think one kiss changes anything? You think that makes you a man? You've been sleepwalking through this marriage for years." It stung. A little. But not in the way she wanted it to. Because this time, I didn't feel small. I felt anchored. "Maybe I was sleepwalking," I said. "But at least I wasn't pretending to be happy while kissing someone else behind my partner's back." She blinked, chest heaving, a vein pulsing near her temple. Then, without another word, She spun on her heel and stormed inside the house. The screen door banged shut behind her, loud and final. No one said anything. They didn't need to. That was the night the mask cracked all the way through. People started talking again, louder than usual, trying to shake the awkwardness. I stayed put, feeling the heat from the fire and the coldness of what had just happened swirling in my chest. I wasn't proud, but I wasn't ashamed either. I wasn't anything really. Just done. I waited. Gave it time. Enough time to make it clear I wasn't following her out of guilt or need. I waited until the energy had shifted back into its usual background hum, until people stopped staring. Then I stood up and walked away from the group. The lake glittered in the distance, calm and dark. I passed the dock, the picnic tables, the quiet edge of the house, and found myself near the guest cabins. One of them had its porch light on, faint and yellow. I don't know what made me check. I don't even know if I was expecting anything. Maybe I was hoping I was wrong. But the door wasn't locked. And the second it opened, I knew I wasn't. I heard the laugh first, low and familiar and smug. Logan. And then I saw them. Rachel in the bed, tangled in the sheets, her back bare, her hair a chaotic mess across the pillow. Logan propped up on one elbow, completely unapologetic. Hey buddy, he grinned. Didn't know we had an audience. Time froze. My fists clenched before I could stop them. I crossed the room in 2 steps and hit him. Once. Twice. The second time, his nose broke, a sharp crack and a rush of blood. Rachel screamed, scrambling off the bed, wrapping herself in a sheet that barely covered her. She grabbed my arm. Noah, stop. I did. Pulled back, breathing hard, hands trembling. Logan groaned, still smiling through it, the bastard. Rachel's eyes were wild. It meant nothing, she gasped. I swear. But I didn't care. Not about her apologies. Not about her panic. Not about the regret that only showed up once the damage was done. I turned and walked out. Didn't slam the door. Didn't say a word. Just left. Outside, the air felt cleaner. Sharper. The kind of air that lets you breathe all the way down. And for the first time in months, I did. Every step back to the main house felt like shedding weight. My shoulders dropped. My jaw unclenched. I wasn't angry. I wasn't hurt. I was free. Back inside, the house had mostly gone quiet. A few people whispered in corners. A couple of them glanced up as I entered, caught a look at my face, and quickly looked away. No one asked where I'd been. Maybe they knew. Maybe they didn't want to know. I went to our room, packed slowly, deliberately, only what mattered. Each folded shirt felt like a small decision. Each pair of socks, a reminder that I was the one choosing this now. Not her. I couldn't stop what she did, but I could decide how I responded. And I chose silence. She didn't follow me. Not right away. Not until I had my bag over my shoulder and my hand on the door. Then I heard it. Noah, wait. I turned. She was standing at the end of the hall, still in that same crumpled sheet like it was a costume she hadn't taken off yet. Her face pale, her voice shaky. Please. It didn't mean anything. I was drunk. I wasn't thinking. That's the problem, I cut in. You never think. Because you never believe there'd be consequences. She stepped closer, desperate. You can't just walk away from this. From everything. I tilted my head. You mean from the marriage where you kissed my friend in front of everyone? Or the one where I found you in his bed? She recoiled like I slapped her. Noah, please. You broke it, I said quietly. And the worst part is, you knew exactly what you were doing. You just didn't think I'd ever stop caring. I walked past her, out the door, and I didn't look back. The screen door shut behind me with a weight that felt final. It didn't slam. It didn't rattle. It just closed, like the last page of a book you never planned to reread. The gravel crunched under my boots as I walked toward the car. I didn't rush. I didn't even feel the cold. Everything inside me had already gone still. By the time I opened the driver's door, my hands were steady. I sat down, closed it softly, and stared through the windshield at the shadowy trees. The reflection of my own face in the glass. I didn't recognize the man looking back. But I trusted him. He didn't look broken. He looked finished. The drive home was quiet. The kind of quiet that doesn't echo, it absorbs. The city was still asleep when I got back. That narrow window just before dawn where even the streetlights seemed to whisper. I carried my bag inside and dropped it by the door. The apartment smelled like dust and something faintly sweet. Maybe her perfume lingering on the blanket tossed over the couch. Nothing had changed. And yet everything had. I didn't go to bed. Didn't shower. Didn't even change my clothes. I just sat on the edge of the couch, elbows on my knees, staring at the coffee table like it might offer answers. The remote, a water glass, a half-dead plant we both forgot to water. It all looked so stupidly ordinary. Like the universe hadn't just flipped upside down. When the sun started bleeding in through the blinds, I stood. Walked to the hallway closet. Opened the small safe we kept under the coats. Pulled out the folder I never thought I'd need. Divorce papers. I'd printed them months ago, Back when things started to feel brittle, I never filled them out. It felt like tempting fate. Like keeping a fire extinguisher in your car because you've noticed smoke under the hood. Now it felt like the only rational thing I'd ever done. I set them on the kitchen table, picked up a pen, started writing. Name, date, grounds, irreconcilable differences. The pen didn't shake. My hand didn't hesitate. Halfway through the first page, I heard the knock. 3 soft taps. I didn't get up right away. Didn't need to look through the peephole to know who it was. I opened the door. Rachel stood there. Same clothes. Hair tied up in a loose knot. Mascara smudged. Eyes red and puffy. She looked like someone who hadn't slept. Someone who'd cried too hard and now didn't know how to stop. Noah, she said. Her voice cracked just saying my name. I didn't respond. I just stepped aside. She walked in slowly, like she wasn't sure she belonged here anymore. And the truth was, she didn't. I shouldn't have done it, she started, then bit her lip hard. I was selfish. I was drunk. I was stupid and angry, and I didn't say a word. Just turned back to the table and continued filling out the paperwork. She saw the forms and stopped mid-sentence. Her voice broke into a whisper. Noah, what is this? You know what it is. Please don't. Her voice trembled. We can fix this. We've been through hard stuff before. I finally looked up. No, we haven't. She sat down across from me like her knees gave out. I made a mistake, she said again. No, I replied. You made a decision. She swallowed, eyes glistening. You don't have to forgive me. Just don't stop loving me. That part hurt. Not because it made me waver, but because of how familiar it once would have sounded. There was a time when I would have grabbed her hand just for saying it. There was a time when that sentence could have undone every bruise between us. But that time had passed. I'm not angry, I said. She blinked, surprised. I'm just done. You played with fire, Rachel, and you called it freedom. Her bottom lip quivered. I slid the papers into a folder and stood. She didn't follow me. Not yet. She just sat there, in the chair we used to argue over who got the bigger slice of pizza in. Now she looked small in it, like a guest in a place that no longer felt like home. I walked down the hall, past our bedroom, past the framed memories nailed into the drywall, each one now feeling like a lie someone else told me. Every photo, every note on the fridge, every shared toothbrush, it all belonged to a version of us that didn't survive. I heard her voice again. Soft. Cracked. Noah. I stopped. She stood there, hands clenched together, like she was trying to keep herself from falling apart. You don't have to say anything else, she said. I know what I did. I know how bad it was. I just needed to see you one last time. To know what I destroyed. I nodded slowly. You want forgiveness? She didn't answer, but the words sat between us like a question she was too ashamed to ask out loud. I walked closer. Not close enough to touch her. Just enough to see her fully. I don't hate you, I said. She inhaled sharply. But I don't believe you anymore. She blinked hard. A tear slipped down one cheek. You didn't lose me because you made a mistake. You lost me because afterward, when I stood there, you shrugged. That's what stayed. Not the kiss. Not even the bed. The way you looked at me like it wasn't worth fixing. Her hands went to her face, shoulders shaking with silent sobs. I'm not coming back, I said. Because what we had, it's not something I can want again. It's something I survived. She nodded, tears streaking down. I'm sorry, she whispered. One last time. I know. I opened the door. She stood still for a few seconds like maybe there was one more line to say. But there wasn't. She stepped out. And I didn't watch her go. Not out of cruelty. Just peace. That afternoon, I met Sophie at a small cafe near the park. She was already there, sitting outside with the sunlight catching her hair, a pair of sunglasses balanced on her head. When she saw me, she smiled. Everything okay? She asked. And for the first time in a long, long time, I could tell the truth. Yeah, it finally is. There's something strange about the way healing starts. It's never loud, never sudden. There's no orchestral swell. No moment where your heart leaps and says, this is it. I'm better now. It's quieter than that. Softer. Like waking up one morning and realizing the ache didn't beat you to consciousness. Like standing in your kitchen and noticing, truly noticing, that your hands have stopped shaking when you reach for the coffee. After that lunch with Sophie, we didn't rush anything. No confessions. No impulsive late-night calls. No candlelit moments full of tension and half-spoken longing. Just check-ins. Sometimes through text. Sometimes over coffee. Sometimes sitting on opposite ends of a park bench talking about nothing that mattered, and somehow that felt like everything. And it was exactly what I needed. 2 weeks passed. One evening, I found myself at her place for the first time. A small apartment above a bakery, windows open, faint cinnamon in the air. Her place was cozy in the way that had nothing to prove. Books stacked on the floor. A half-solved puzzle on the table. A cat named Theodore watching me like I'd interrupted his private hour. We sat on the couch. Close, but not quite touching. A movie played in the background, but neither of us paid attention. Something about sitting next to her made the noise around us fade. Not in a dramatic, cinematic way, more like a soft dimmer switch turning the world down just enough. She sipped her wine, looked at me sideways. I haven't had someone just sit with me like this in a long time, she said. You seem like someone people don't walk away from, I replied. She smiled faintly. They don't. I just stopped gripping too tightly. That stayed with me for the rest of the night. Later, after the wine was finished and the credits rolled on a movie we couldn't name, her knee brushed mine. I didn't move. Neither did she. There was no rush, no hunger, just quiet. Presence. Eventually, she rested her head on my shoulder. I closed my eyes. Not because I was tired, because it felt like peace. When I stood up to leave, she walked me to the door. She hesitated for a second, just a breath, then looked up. Not yet, I said gently. She nodded. No sadness in her eyes. Just grace. Back at my apartment, something felt different. Not dramatic. Not spiritual. Just easier. I passed the kitchen table where the folder with the signed divorce papers still sat, unopened since Rachel left. I glanced at them, then at the window. The skyline blinked back at me. I didn't feel urgency anymore. I didn't feel rage. I just felt still. Rachel hadn't reached out since that day. No texts. No calls. Nothing. And maybe that silence was her final apology. Or maybe it was just her way of holding on to control. Either way, it didn't matter anymore. It didn't hurt. It didn't echo. It was just gone. The next morning, I woke up and brewed coffee without thinking. Sat at the window in the early light, steam rising from the mug, the world outside beginning to hum. My phone buzzed. Sophie, hope you woke up to something good. I looked at the message for a long moment, then smiled, not on purpose. Just because it happened. Me. I did. A week later, it was Saturday again. I'd just gotten back from a long walk through the park, earbuds in, mind drifting. I had plans with Sophie later, nothing special. Lunch. A used bookstore she loved. Maybe a walk through the arboretum. Nothing heavy. That was the point. I turned my key in the lock, pushed open the door. And there she was. Rachel. Sitting on the edge of the couch like a statue carved out of guilt. Her shoulders hunched forward, hands clasped, eyes glassy. She stood when she saw me. Hi. I didn't answer. Just set my keys down and hung my jacket, taking my time. I didn't ask how she got in. I knew. She still had a spare. That was on me. I won't stay long, she said quickly. Her voice trembled. I needed to say it to your face. I leaned against the counter, arms crossed. Say what? She took a shaky breath. What I did, with Logan. It broke something. I know that. I felt it snap the second it happened. I said nothing. I thought I could be reckless for one night, she continued. Thought I could chase whatever feeling I thought I was missing. But I lit a match I couldn't put out. I didn't just burn us. I burned the one person who never left me. She looked down. Her hands were shaking. I've been going to therapy, she added, like she needed to prove something. Trying to figure out why I keep destroying the good things in my life. Why I need chaos to feel alive. And I think I know now. I raised an eyebrow. Because I never felt in control, she said. And you were always so steady. So sure. I think I wanted to shake it. To see if I could break it. And when I did, I realized what I lost. I looked at her. Not with hatred. Not even sadness. Just clarity. You want forgiveness? She nodded once. Yes. And what happens if I give it to you? She looked confused. Like the question caught her off guard. Do you think we go back to how it was? I asked. Do you think it erases the way you looked me in the eye after that night and acted like none of it mattered? No, she said softly. But maybe it lets you move on. And maybe it lets me stop hating myself. I stepped closer. Not close enough to be a comfort. Just enough to make sure every word landed. I don't hate you, Rachel. She blinked fast, surprised. I just don't believe you. She opened her mouth to speak, then stopped. You didn't lose me because you made a mistake. You lost me because afterward, you shrugged. Her face crumpled. One hand went in her mouth as tears spilled freely now. I'm not angry anymore, I said. But I'm not coming back. Because what I had with you, it's not something I want again. It's something I survived. She nodded slowly, shoulders trembling. I'm sorry, she whispered. One last time. I know. I opened the door. She stood there a moment like she might say something else. But she didn't. She stepped out into the hallway. And I didn't follow. The door closed behind her with a soft click. Not a slam. Not a bang. Just a sound with no return. I stood there for a second, my hand still resting on the doorknob, as if I had to feel the boundary between what was and what was no more. Then I turned away, walked back inside, and let the silence settle. But this silence was different. Not the same kind I'd sat in weeks ago, the one that buzzed in your ears and made you feel like your own breathing was too loud. This silence was calm. Still. Like the inside of a cathedral after everyone has gone home. A few hours later, I met Sophie for lunch. She was already at the table, sunglasses on the edge of her nose, flipping through a second-hand novel while waiting for me. When I sat down, she looked up and tilted her head slightly. "Everything okay?" She asked it gently, not with pressure, not with expectation. Just the kind of concern that comes from watching someone learn to stand again. "Yeah," I said. "It finally is." We talked about her new project, about a local gallery exhibit she wanted to see, about the weird weather shift and the bakery across from her building that started selling matcha croissants. It wasn't electric. It wasn't poetic. It was real. And that was enough. Later, as we walked down the street, she pointed out a bookstore I'd never noticed. We ducked inside. She disappeared into the nonfiction section while I browsed used paperbacks, thumbing through cracked spines and yellowed pages that smelled like memory. When we met back at the register, we each had a book in hand. Mine was about architecture in forgotten cities. Hers was poetry. She smiled when she saw my choice. "Looks like you're finally starting to rebuild." Maybe I was. That night, back at my place, I sat at the kitchen table alone. The folder still lay where I left it. Divorce papers signed, sealed, final. I'd call a lawyer on Monday. Or Tuesday. I wasn't rushing. There was no need to rush endings when beginnings had already started to grow. I glanced at my phone. No missed calls. No unread messages. Rachel had kept her promise, or at least, her distance. For the first time, it didn't feel like a power play. It didn't feel like a tactic. It felt like acceptance. And distance? Distance felt good. The next morning, I woke early. Made coffee. Didn't check my phone right away. Didn't feel the pull to stare into a screen, waiting for something to make me feel real. I stepped out onto the balcony instead, mug in hand, watching the city wake up in soft, gold-tinted waves. My phone buzzed once. Sophie. No text. Just a photo. It was a sunrise. Different angle. Her apartment's view. Same sky. And that was the whole point. We weren't saving each other. We were just learning how to exist under the same sun again. Later that week, we met for dinner. This time, no small talk. After dessert, she looked at me and said, "If this is just friendship, I'm good with that. But if it's more, I want it to be slow. No expectations. No rebound labels. Just real." I nodded. I want it to be whatever it's meant to be. No pressure. Just truth. She smiled. Not in relief, but in agreement. We walked back to her place. Stopped at her door. No kiss. No invite. Just a pause. And that pause said everything. "Take your time," she whispered. "But don't stand still for too long. You deserve to move again." I drove home feeling something I hadn't felt in a long time. Not euphoria. Not butterflies. Just peace. Weeks passed. Then months. Rachel never reached out again. No surprise visits. No cryptic messages. A friend mentioned she moved out of the city, took a job somewhere upstate. I didn't dig deeper. I didn't need to. What happened between us would never be undone, but it also wouldn't be relived. That part of my life had its ending. And this was whatever came after the credits. Sophie and I grew closer, slowly, steadily. Nothing explosive. No declarations. Just presence. Books shared. Meals cooked. Walks taken in familiar neighborhoods that began to feel new with her beside me. One night, while we were cleaning up dinner, she asked me, "Do you regret any of it? The past?" "No," I said. "Not anymore." Because even the ugliest things in life, they leave behind clarity. And clarity, if you're lucky, becomes peace. She nodded, poured more wine, and we sat on the couch again. Just like that first night, her head on my shoulder, my eyes closed, the world turning gently around us. Not burning anymore. Not crashing. Just turning. And I, for the first time in years, felt like I was turning with it.